guys, welcome to Broken Silence. I'm Sanyaa Gardez. People of all religions and races have moved to the UK for a chance at a better life. But secret documents have come forward that show UK's involvement in the 1984 massacre at the Golden Temple, leaving many Sikhs to feel betrayed by the country they call home. So today we're asking the question, should the UK accept responsibility for its part in Operation Blue Star, and exactly how would that help now some 30 years later? Joining me on the panel is Sarb Singh from RajoanaTV and Gurinder Singh Joshan from the Sikh Council. I hope I pronounced your surname correctly. Thank you guys for joining. Sarb, do you think if there was just an acknowledgement, an apology, that would make a huge difference?
I think you'd have to ask probably one of the 250,000 Sikhs or their families that have disappeared. Ask those families the questions who are still surviving. Would you be happy with an acknowledgement that, you know, we've killed your son or your daughter, they were killed in a fake encounter, or they were disappeared in the middle of the night or custodially tortured? I think you'd get a resounding no. And this, I think, is the biggest tragedy for Sikhs, is that 30 years later, there's no redress for us. You've mentioned the BJP, you've mentioned Narendra Modi. Last year, he told, when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, he told Sikhs from Gujarat to get out of his state and go back to Punjab because they don't belong there. This is on the back of him being implicated in the Muslim genocide in Gujarat. And he goes on to become the Prime Minister of the country. So that spells even more doom and gloom for us, to be honest. And I don't think it's enough for somebody, and again, I'll go into a bit more tragedy for us. We say that the genocide has happened, so we've got Operation Blue Star, then you've got the Delhi massacres in Delhi, obviously. Right. Then you've got the 10 years of armed militancy and state repression on top of that. Despite all of that, we have families, probably 25,000 families in Punjab to this day, who don't even have a death certificate to say your son or daughter was killed by us. They still look at the doorstep to think they're going to walk in at any moment. You know, we've all got mothers who, when we step outside the house, they don't really sleep well until you walk through the door. And these are mothers who, they don't know, was my son or daughter, were they raped in custody? Were their arms and limbs, were they taken off? Were they thrown in the river? You know, where is my son or daughter? So, you know, we lament at the past and we think, look, this is, you know, so many people are being killed. The real tragedy for us is that despite the killings and despite the murder and the genocide, the silent genocide continues, and that's with the victims. And we don't even have an acknowledgement that, yes, you know, your child was taken away by us. And so I think this is one of the biggest things for us. And this is why the embers of 84 are still in the air.
And I think that, you know, leads to my next question for our viewers. You know that a lot of our viewers are teenagers and younger generation. What could they take away from this program? You know, what is it that people can walk away with knowing that they didn't know before?
I think the first thing is the fact that even though this happened 30 years ago, so far away, there is an impact in terms of UK, being UK Sikhs living in this country. You know, there was an involvement of whatever kind by the UK government at the time. So that brings it very much home to somebody living here in this day and age. And I think also it is about the fact that, you know, it's very easy to use words like genocide, massacre and things like that. We're talking about individuals, we're talking about, you know, people who, some of them who just happened to go to Sri Harmandir Sahib on that day, commemorate the Siddhi Purab of the 5th Guru, you know, a major celebration or major event, a commemoration in the Sikh calendar. They just happened to go there as normal Sikhs.
Absolutely. I was going through news footage from 1984, and there were infants, there were, you know, babies that were shot at point-blank range. So, you know, for things like that, I think it's okay to use the word massacre or genocide, because you're not just there fishing out who you think are the militia. You're killing babies and the elderly and women.
And I think what's important for us is that, you know, when you say what can people take away from this program, people believe that 84 is a number and that was an episode in our history, a bloody episode in our history. What people can take away from this program is how does a civilized country like the UK, despite the involvement, which we could probably touch upon later, despite the UK involvement, how does a civilized country conduct itself? And how is India conducting itself? I'll just give you an example, and I won't name names. The head of Cumbria Police not so long ago was misusing his credit card, and I think he racked up a bill of £80,000. He was taken away from his post. He was charged with fraud and misuse of a public office. And then they looked at a review of how do we manage credit cards in senior posts. That was just to misuse a credit card. Let's look at Punjab. The person who is in charge of the police, the entire state, the DGP, Director General of Punjab Police, is somebody called Sameed Saini. He has multiple cases against him of murder. One of the cases against him is the murder of Davinderpal Singh Pullar, who's been in the news lately for, his possible execution. He murdered Davinderpal Singh Pullar's father, paternal uncle, and his nephew. He's got multiple cases registered against him, yet he's still in charge of Punjab's police. So here you have the UK. This is the life I'm used to. I'm used to a life where if somebody's misusing a credit card, no matter who they are or where they are, they will get investigated. The people of Punjab are used to a life. This is why people say to us, like, you're harping on about it, you're born in the UK. People of Punjab, they're sort of moving on. But what kind of silence is that? It's the silence of the graveyard. People who were implicated, there's countless witness testimonies to say, Sajjan Kumar, Jagdish Titler, I saw him directing somebody to go and burn a historic Gurdwara. I saw him giving out voters lists and school registers to say, this is where Sikh homes and shops are. These people who were MPs at the time are now union ministers. They're in the cabinet of India. So we talk about, what can people get away from this? We're not just talking about never forgetting a massacre. We're trying to tell people that the massacre continues to this day, and the people who were implicated have actually been rewarded for this. And this is why you can't move on. You can't say to people, it's forgive and forget, when there's no balm that's being applied to our wounds. In fact, it's always been constantly open and rub salt into there.
And as Sikhs, I mean, what I'd say is there's a right and a wrong here, and very, very, very clearly, what happened in 1984 was very wrong, and even though we may be so far away, so far in geographically and time-wise, that doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility to stand up. Sikhs. We have if you take Amarat, you have an identity, and the whole purpose of that is not to be able to walk by on the other side of the road when something wrong is happening.
Right.
And I think that's the key thing here, is whether this was this happened in our homeland in Amritsar and in India, yeah. But if there are wrongs happening anywhere in the world, it's the responsibility of Sikh to speak out and say that is wrong. I'm not going to allow that to happen, and that's all we're asking for here.
But I'm wondering if realistically we can expect the UK to step up and not only take responsibility but try to somehow rectify this wrongs. Because if you look at what they did in the Middle East, what they continue to do, going into countries and creating havoc. Can we really have any expectations from either the UK government or the India government to do right by the people that they've wronged? I
think even if we look at what's happened recently with I think they want to make a statue of Mahatma Gandhi in London. That was on the back of a £250 million deal to sell weapons to India. So it was a sort of a sweetener and a sort of trying to build relations. And the same thing happened 30 years ago. There was a multi-million-pound helicopter deal, and then you had the attack on Harmandir Sahib and UK advice and guidance on how to go about to do it. So 30 years later, they're still using the same sort of strategy. They are pacifying sort of India by having these statues and saying, yes, we've got an intricate, complex and great deep relationship. But then they're selling these sort of weapons to India. So I can see the same sort of tactic between the two countries. And for us, Sanya, I think for us as Sikhs, and I can probably speak for a lot of Sikhs, we feel let down and completely betrayed by the two countries that we've done the most for. When I talk about India, we talk about 90% of the people who sacrificed to liberate India from imperialism came from the Sikh community. 83,000 Sikhs died in the First and Second World War for this country. These were Sikhs who, they left the fields of Punjab and they left India to come and fight in Europe for a country they would never see, only because they thought we're going to do something for Europe and stand against tyranny. But this is how we were repaid. We were repaid by liberating India for decades of oppression, whether it was economic and political, religious. Same with the UK. Despite 83,000 lives given to this country, we are repaid by going against our back and giving advice and guidance to a country. I mean, let's put it a different way. If the Italian government approached this government and said, right, we need to draw up a plan of how to kidnap the Pope from the Vatican, will you please give us some advice and guidance? I don't think they would touch that.
See, I want to get into how the economy plays a role and how money plays a role in how people are treated and what actions the government actually takes to justify or to rectify a wrong. You're watching Broken Silence. We'll be back after this short break. Hi guys, you're watching Broken Silence. I'm Sanyaa Gardez, and today we're discussing the massacre at the Golden Temple in 1984 and the secret documents that have emerged showing the UK's involvement in what happened there. Joining me on the panel is Sarb Singh from RajoanaTV and Gurinder Singh Joshi from the Sikh Council. Now, we left off talking about money talks and India now becoming this global player, this global economy. The UK obviously knows that they need to think ahead and think about money. So can we really expect them to acknowledge the wrong that they've done to a minority? Can you really realistically expect that to happen?
I think you're right, money talks, and even when we look back what happened 30 years ago, the documentation that came out in the public domain, you know, when you look at all the other stuff going on within the cabinet in the UK, etc., and all the other documents that are there, they all focus very much on this bilateral relationship, and there was a lot of discussion going on about at the time about selling helicopters to India and stuff, and that was the whole background to it. I think even now, UK government, just like any other government, will be looking to increase trade with India, and that's natural. You know, the government will want to do that, and as you know, as UK Sikhs, we benefit from that as well. You know, if there's good trade between UK and other countries, then you know we have jobs in this country. We buy goods that come from abroad, so we benefit from that as well. But I think that's only one dimension of it. Yeah, if trade is important, increasingly important with India, then as within that, the relationships that UK government has with India, has with the Indian diaspora within this country, will also be important as well, because both will play off each other. Yeah, you can't have increasing trade with India and ignore. You know, even when they talk to China and stuff, they will always talk about human rights abuses there as well. The other side of it also is money is important in terms of trade with India, but money is also important in terms of the impact of the Sikh community within this country as well. So the Sikh community is quite a small community, and the last census shows that 430,000 Sikhs in this country. But in terms of personal wealth, the Sikh community in the UK, and the census showed this as well, is second only to the Jewish community. In terms of the Sikh pound, it's massive. Yeah. Right. Alongside that, you know, Sikhs traditionally in this country voted Labour, yeah, and you know, but there are large numbers of constituencies at the moment, something like 85 constituencies, in which the ethnic minority vote is bigger than the current majority of the sitting member of Parliament. So, you know, members of Parliament and political parties of all persuasions know that Sikhs and other ethnic minorities are a key factor coming up to a general election next year. Right. No party can form a government without getting ethnic minority votes. And you know, research after last general election showed that Sikhs are one of the communities who are more likely to move away from the Labour Party to other party. Right. So in terms of that, in terms of all those things, you know, Sikhs are somebody that they will have to listen, not just Sikhs, but other communities as well. They will have to listen to us. But it's about how we put our demand and our voice across as well.
I think by the same token, it's quite a poignant thing you said, Sanyaa, about money talks. In terms of constituency, that's fine, but on a national, international policy level, Sikhs are not an interesting project to get involved in. We're not interested, okay. But we don't have masses of oil in Punjab that you can go in and under the guise of humanity and sort of take some resources, like, you know, some of the other conflicts.
Well, this is why I asked you the question, because you know, we all see what's happening in the Middle East and we see how that's being covered, and everybody knows what's going on, but you just have to kind of deal with it, because there's a lot of money at stake for the West in the Middle East. So if such a large population of people is being wronged and nothing's being done about it, we're saying that, you know, the Sikh population is a minority compared to that. Realistically, we're saying, could we expect the UK government or the India government to come and say, you know, actually, this is what happened, this is what we're going to do about it, this is how we're going to fix it. On the flip side, David Cameron said that he's not going to do arms deal with Russia. So maybe there is a possibility that calling, you know, awareness and talking about the issue will force the government somehow to do the same. Do you think that might be a possibility? Or is that a hope?
I think even with the UK documents, it wasn't something that was 300 years ago. That was policy that was 30 years ago. And you can, if you read some of the letters, they basically are talking to a prime minister, Indira Gandhi, who was impeached as a prime minister. She was done for election fraud. She was taken out of office. She dissolved her parliament and ruled as a dictator. Why would Margaret Thatcher and this English-British government want to deal and give advice and guidance to somebody who was effectively ruling as a dictator? Because money was talking. Mm-hmm. Some of the letters even say that this shouldn't get out because it will upset India because of these deals. Right. Mm-hmm. This wasn't policy 300 years ago. This was only 30 years ago. So why would we expect anything different now?
Then my question is, when we are talking about this, we're calling, raising awareness, and you're very vocal, both of you are, what's the point? Should we just move past it?
I don't think we can, and I think what we have to do as an intelligent community in this country, I think Saab is absolutely right. There isn't oil in the Punjab, there aren't those kind of natural resources, but it's down to us as a community in this country, as an intelligent community, to work out what are the levers that we've got over a UK government, whichever colour it may be. And I think some of the things I mentioned earlier are levers which are very real to them. It's about identifying those levers. It's about exercising those levers as well. And we've got to be very proactive. We've got to be more organised in terms of how we make those demands, etc. We understand. I think the other thing that's very important to say is UK government can't deliver justice for those victims in India. That's got to come from the Indian government. Yeah. But what UK government can do, they can raise their voice. They can say, look, what happened 30 years ago in India was wrong. They can say there needs to be a UN-led investigation in what happened in India. They can change the language they use. They can start talking about genocide and things like that. There are a lot of things UK government can do, but it's up to us as a community to identify what the levers are and how we use those levers to make that happen.
So let me ask you both, say for argument's sake, say David Cameron was here. Would you simply ask him to open up an investigation and to look into it further? What would you ask him?
I think we'd have to be a bit rational and logical first. We can't ask one sovereign nation to go to another sovereign nation and say, right, give us all your books and all your dirty deeds. It's not going to happen. We look for an international inquiry. What does an international inquiry look like? Which heads of state would actually want to get involved in something like this? I don't think... and then essentially we're asking a government, the way I see it, we're asking one government, the British government, who have shown us that they don't really care about us, to go and approach another government who care even less about us, to go and investigate the genocide that they sanctioned and covered up.
So this is what I'm asking.
Exactly. This is where Sikhs are sort of left in a neither here nor there sort of no man's land. We feel that we are sort of left alone in the international community, sort of in a refugee kind of status, where we don't feel that somebody is fighting our corner. And this is when you get frustrated pockets of communities who do things that aren't really, a normal human being would do. Right. Yeah, so...
Because I'm going to ask you questions that our viewers might be wondering, so I hope you guys don't get offended. But some of our viewers might think that Sikhs have it pretty good. You can wear a turban in, England. You had a Sikh sergeant in the army. They hold political power. They're people of influence. So, if everything is going well, you're really not prosecuted. You have the freedom to practice your religion and live the life that you want. Then shouldn't you be grateful for the opportunity? Shouldn't you just let bygones be bygones?
I think the freedom we enjoy in this country didn't just happen by chance. They were hard fought for, and even now those freedoms aren't absolute. Even now, I've got the right to wear my turban and walk around and etc. But even now, just in the last few months, there are Sikhs being sacked from their jobs because they're wearing turban. So those freedoms aren't absolute, and they were hard won for.
Don't you feel safer in the UK than India? As a Sikh?
Of course.
For Sikhs, the situation in the UK is much better than not just India, but a lot of parts of the world, and we recognise that, and that is something we're grateful for, and that's something that was hard won for. But part of the reason why it's hard won for, things Saab referred to earlier, 83,000 Sikhs died wearing turbans in the First and Second World War. Yeah? And if that doesn't show you commitment to the British cause, then what does? Yeah? So we're not asking for anything over and beyond what our rights are. You asked earlier if David Cameron was here. The first thing I would ask him is, can you give us an assurance that they would never ever consider again helping anybody attack a Golden Temple, the Hanuman Temple, or any other similar faith place as well. You know, that's the first thing. And then, you know, they did do an investigation. They did publish some additional documents, but to this date, they have not published other documents that we know exist. They have not published the advice that they gave the Indian government. So I would ask him, you know, and that's not. I'm not asking that as a Sikh. I'm not asking that in any other context other than as British citizen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if my government were involved in something like that, then I want to know what were they up to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just because we have a wide viewership for our non-Sikh audience, how similar is the struggle with Sikhs in India to the struggle for the Palestinians in Israel? Do you see parallels?
I think the parallels are that you've got disproportionality in terms of the powers that exist locally. I think there are very differences as well. Yeah, and the differences, you know, one of the key ones is in terms of how Israel came to exist and you know the change in land over that period of time. I think another difference is that the Sikh argument in Punjab, it wasn't a Sikh argument in the Punjab. What was being argued about, and right after 1947, after partition, it was about use of Punjabi language. It was about access to water. It was about access to. It was about having a state capital within the state. You know, these weren't anything particular to the Sikhs. Yeah? Saab referred earlier to Indira Gandhi being impeached, etc. You know, that was the political climate at the time, and very clearly what Indira Gandhi saw with a general election coming up, that she needed something, an issue with which she could unite a lot of people around her to vote for her. That's what happened in 1984, quite frankly. And you know, that is very often hidden by some of the language and some of the images we see. But that's actually what happened, and I think that's a big difference there to what's going on in Palestine. Right. You know, Hamas has a very specific ideology. Yeah, and you know, the struggle of the Sikhs is not an ideological one in that sense.
So, you would say the Palestinians are oppressed people because of occupation. Do you think Sikhs are oppressed in India?
I think even if you look at the letters, and people, I'm just shocked that, you know, people didn't even make a big deal about this. The letter that Indira Gandhi had written, and this was disclosed to us by, you know, the additional documents after the report. The first couple of lines that Indira Gandhi writes to Margaret Thatcher is that the situation is what it is. Those who wear the religious garb are the most dangerous. So
this is why I made that parallel, because
exactly. So it's not, people are being identified by an appearance and then criminalized because of that appearance, as opposed to any crime that's been committed. So I mean, the thing that we've been crying about for 30 years is proved in that just one little sentence, that we were the victimized, and ultimately legitimized and legalized our physical extermination because of the way we looked. And I think this was one of the biggest things in the documents, and something that's been failed to be picked up by a lot of people, is that proves what we've been saying for 30 years, that because of our appearance, I know in an ideological sense, I know what you're talking about Palestine, but our appearance actually became the sort of death warrant for us.
This is exactly why I made the parallel. I want to continue this discussion. We're talking about Operation Blue Star and the UK's involvement in the massacre in 1984. You're watching Broken Silence. We'll be back after this short break. Hi guys, welcome back to Broken Silence. I'm Sanyaa Gardez, and today we're talking about the massacre at the Golden Temple in 1984 and the UK's involvement in it. Now, the documents show that the UK did send over somebody to take part in that. Obviously, Sikhs feel betrayed by this because now many Sikhs call UK their home and trust the government. We've said if David Cameron was here, we would ask him to probably put pressure on the Indian government. We also touched upon the fact that money talks. Now, do you really think that sending over the UK's involvement was actually that severe or integral part of 1984, or do you think it was just
I think clearly
small?
The fact that it wanted to send an SAS soldier, they're all about a quick clinical sort of operation, get in and out, which is fair enough. Clearly, they're saying that we told the Indian government that if you want to get Sant Bhindranwale out, you know, where there was no judicial verdict of guilt against the guy, he was labelled a terrorist and killed as one without taking him to court or arresting him. So they've said that we wanted to bring some kind of helicopter down and snatch him and take him away. Clearly, the Indian government didn't listen to our instructions because there was a mass, huge, full-throttle military operation which resulted in the death of 6,000–7,000 people. So they didn't listen to the advice. Now, we can say that they used Kevlar helmets, they used Russian howitzer helicopters, and they used SAS soldier expertise. That's all well and good, but it's what is a gun unless somebody's pulling the trigger? You know, what is a bomb unless someone's detonating it and throwing it? You know, so it doesn't matter what advice and guidance they were given. Clearly, they didn't listen to it. But by the same token, the flip token to that is, what right did the British government have to give advice and guidance, no matter how minimal it was in the first place? What groundwork did they do to see what was the turmoil about in Punjab? What were the demands of the Punjabi people? Did they know that the Amnesty International published a report in 1983 to say Sikhs were arbitrarily arrested and women were raped in custody? Did they read any of these kind of reports? Did they do any groundwork to see what is it that you want exactly? Because the answers they would get is that I'm not even considered a Sikh in this country. Right. I can't even drink clean water. My water's being diverted. There's farmer suicide. There's female feticide. The economy's going down the drain. We can't diversify what we're doing in terms of our work. There's no jobs for graduates. None of that. It was right, okay, if you want to get him, this is how you got to do it. So I honestly believe, and I go back to that point of the Vatican, they would never get involved in that, in an operation to snatch the Pope from the Vatican. At that point, Sant Janel Singh Bhindranwale, he was a democratically elected head of a traditional Sikh seminary. They had no right to go and take our saint from that complex and snatch him and kidnap him because he wasn't involved in any criminal activity and there was no judicial verdict of guilt.
So you think it was a guise, it was just, you know, an excuse used to do what happened?
Yeah, of course. And I think it was a clever ploy from the Indian government to get the UK implicated in this, because what it effectively has done is taken the heat off the Indian government. And I wouldn't be surprised if the forward-thinking nations in this world will think, let's get the UK involved, let's get, even if it's the smallest amount of advice and guidance. So 30 years down the line, when there are going to be disclosures, then the heat comes off us and the UK Sikhs start pointing their finger at the British government.
See, the reason we're doing the show is actually to, you know, create awareness and to focus on what happened. But my point is that, you know, the massacres that happen in Sri Lanka, genocides that happen all over the world, there's so much footage, you know, that the UN gets. That nothing happens. You know, there's a little bit of an uproar, some social media storm, and then it's gone. So really, you know, what are the chances of something happening? Any kind of progress being made? I mean, programs like this can create awareness, they can create the dialogue, they could let people know what happened, but really what can we do to make a change besides maybe writing letters to our government or doing interviews? What else can we do?
I think it is about that. It is about lobbying governments and to step up to the plate and you know, argue for that change at their level. It is about you know, creating and raising awareness on and on. You know, we've got people. You know, a lot of your viewers now wouldn't have been born 30 years ago. So you know, it's about creating awareness. It is about lobbying, and it is. I don't think we can give up, you know. As long as there are victims who have never received justice, who don't even know whether their, you know, husbands or fathers are dead or alive, you know, we can't just sit back and let that go. Now, as time goes on, and those victims and their families die, and you know, time goes on, and maybe this is what the Indian government is looking for. That would just sit tight, and people will forget, but people won't forget, you know.
But it was one of you that made a point earlier, and it was really poignant that the Sikhs that are living in Punjab or in India right now have in essence moved on, and it's the Sikhs that are living in the UK that are still, you know, focused on this issue. What is the difference between the Sikhs that are living in India, who you say have moved on for the most part? I mean, they're living in the place where all of this happened, you know, where all this took place, but they've kind of just moved past it.
They haven't moved on. The reality is, 84 was a Holocaust.
Do you want to hold that?
Yeah. Let's look at the historical precedents. The last major Holocaust was with Hitler and the Jews. The British intervened because it was on their doorstep, to a certain extent. There was 2 world wars. wasn't just 83,000 Sikhs that died. You have to understand 2 million fought. 2 million Sikhs came across twice to a foreign land with foreign people and put their life on the line. 200,000 Sikhs were injured. This is something that we as Sikhs are very passive and don't remind the British government enough of the real sacrifices that we have put forward as a community, number one. Number two, this was a Holocaust, a pre-prepared Holocaust. The last Holocaust that took place, we're reminded every week, every year, every month by the Jewish community, there was a Holocaust. Why? So it doesn't happen again. We are told, Anne Frank's diaries, we're told at school, through books, through media, through films, Schindler's List, yeah? This is about PR and awareness. We as a community are very young in media and awareness and PR. What we need to do is step up to the plate. The new generation need to wake up, use PR, media, to prevent another Holocaust happening, because in India, there is a possibility of another one. Now, Indian Sikhs, Indian other communities, have not forgotten. They're quiet because they're suppressed.
I wouldn't say they're quiet. There's huge rallies that happen across the UK.
But the difference, Sanya, is going back to your point, is the difference between Punjabis moving on and us being wedged in this sort of thing. The last rally that we went to was in London. 30,000 people. There's police presence.
That's a significant amount of people. Right.
The last major protest in Punjab, a young man called Jaspal Singh was shot dead by a Punjab police officer. There wasn't a single investigation into his death.
So you think it's just based fear?
It's fear. We've got a YouTube channel called RajoanaTV, where we sort of expose some of the system in India and some of the killers and what's going on, like Samir Seni, who I've mentioned. If I was sat in Punjab making these videos, I don't think I'd be sat, I don't know what my fate would be.
Right.
So, we talk about Punjabis here and Punjabis there. We have to become their voice because no one's listening to theirs. We have to sort of pick up that mantle because the orphans of our history look towards us. If the killers of your family are the ones who are in charge of police, if the killers of your family are the ones who are the lawmakers, what chance do you have to get justice or give voice to your concerns or the massacre that you've just faced? So we talk about the silence in Punjab and the noise that we're making. I say that's the silence of the graveyard. The graveyard isn't the voice. The dead have no voice, and the people who are still alive, the legacy is that they are petrified. They've been beaten into submission.
So let me ask you a question, and probably a little bit controversial, but if as a Sikh living in India, you don't feel 100% safe and protected by your government, is it really home?
For Sikhs who live there, it's home. For myself, I'm a British Sikh. I was born here.
But I'm saying if you're living in kind of fear, if you're afraid to remind the government of the atrocities that took place, I mean, your home is someplace that you feel safe, right, and protected. And this is why Sikhs living in the UK feel so outraged and betrayed, because this is where they call home. So now they feel betrayed by the government that's supposed to protect them, the place that they're supposed to feel safe. So if you're living in a country that you're calling home, but yet you're afraid to voice all of these injustices that have happened because you might get killed, is that really home then?
It can't be.
I think where those people there who have suffered so much, they don't see any justice. They don't see anybody listening to them. One thing we have to recognise is that what happened between 1984 and 1995. There was a militant struggle. There was a major crackdown by the state on Sikhs in the Punjab. But after 1995, there hasn't been any militant struggle. And there's been every reason why the state could have given that justice, could have reconciled what happened and moved on from there. Now, if the state doesn't do that, then those people are justified in asking. Well, actually, I think you're right. They are justified in asking, is this home for us?
And the question arises: was it ever home for us? After Indian independence, Punjab was singled out, truncated geographically. The water was taken. The economy was reduced to nothing. We weren't even to this day. In 1981, in the Mandla vs. Lee case in this country, we were recognised as a separate race, not just a separate people, a separate race, an ethnic group. To this day, our religion isn't even recognised in the Indian constitution. Was that place ever home for us? A place where we had to court 200,000 arrests just to recognise our language, whereas the rest of India, they were separated on a linguistic basis. So the question really for me, somebody like me, arises: was that place ever home for us? And again, your question's quite right. Do we consider that home? And for me, it's not. India is not home for me.
But you know, there's another dimension to this as well. Yeah, for me, the UK is home. This is where I live. This is where I was born. This is where my kids go to school. I can't see myself in any kind of circumstances moving back to India. So for me, this is home. Yeah, but there are ties with that land in terms of our religion, our culture, extended family ties. But those people who are living there, that is their home. That's where they live. That's where the whole life is. Yeah, but life is more than just about existing. It is about having that freedom. Yeah, and some of the things, in 1947 and the run-up to partition, Sikhs were promised a glow of freedom to stay within India, and that glow of freedom hasn't ever appeared. Yeah, and that's all Sikhs are asking for over there. I don't think that's a big ask. Yeah, but if you're not even going to get the glow of freedom, and you're going to be oppressed, and the state tries to exterminate your whole community, then I think Sikhs are justified in asking, well, actually, where are we?
I think it's even bigger than that. See, I'm a human being first.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to live anywhere on the planet. This is a planet for human beings. Mankind, kind man. I have the right to live in it. For me, India is home. Punjab is home, and England is home. I've got the choice to commute between the two, just as Pakistanis commute in Pakistan. And
I'd like to see me commute from here to Punjab.
I want to see you answer that question in 1 second. Hold on a second. I want to continue this discussion. You're watching Broken Silence. We're talking about the massacre that happened at the Golden Temple in 1984. We'll be back after this short break. Hi guys, you're watching Broken Silence. I'm Sanyaa Gardez, and today we're talking about Operation Blue Star. We've talked about the history, and we've talked about the things that we want from the UK government, things that we expect. The rallies are, creating awareness, but really, what can we do going forward? Are rallies and marches enough, or do we really need to take some action?
I think we live in a democratic society here, and decisions in this country are made democratically. And everybody has a vote in this country, and that is the single most important thing. Is UK government can't deliver the justice we need in India, but what they can do, they can speak out, and they will only speak out if they understand that the UK population is concerned about this. So what I would say to viewers is this isn't about the Sikhs. It's not about Harmandir Sahib. This is about a genocide. Yeah? And wherever genocide takes place, Sikhs should speak out, and everybody should speak out. This is
why I posed the question. In 1947, when Israel was formed, obviously UK had a big part of that, and the people that have been occupied and are living there have been asking for justice since then. But it's not happening, and it hasn't happened. And so when groups are formed to start taking action, people start noticing, and it starts causing people to talk and people to find out about an issue that they weren't aware of. Do you think this issue of 1984 also needs action as opposed to just discussion?
What it is, Sanyaa, we haven't had our Nuremberg trials. The killers, and we haven't even been able to define what's happened to us as a genocide. And this is how far back we are from our goal, which is to get justice. We can't even define this as a genocide. I mean, there's a petition that went, I think, last year to Belgium, I think it was, to Brussels, to try and get this turned, what happened in Delhi alone, as a genocide. And obviously, when we can get things defined as a genocide, you get into a realm of war crimes, taking people to The Hague, and we haven't even had that. So I think it's really important that, this is why I think programs like this are important, because there's people in this country who think, well, it's just happened and now we've got to move on. Well, it's really difficult to move on when the perpetrators and the criminals who not only are roaming free, but actually controlling, running government. So it's really important that Sikhs have their Nuremberg trials. And what's really galling for us is that, Sanyaa, you talk about Operation Blue Star, and you mentioned at the start of the show that a little kid was shot, and, if that's not a massacre, what is? Well, this government was allowing General Bra, who orchestrated the Operation Blue Star, freely into this country, So we seriously, obviously, are in a bit of limbo, but I think we need to politicise ourselves as Sikhs even more, so that we can sort of maneuver in the international arena and get these people and bring them to book.
That's what I was going to ask you. Instead of it just being a Sikh issue, and I think you mentioned this before, it's a humanitarian issue. It's a, you know, it's a wider issue. So do you think it would be wise to get other communities involved in this?
In Canada, there's a guy called Jagmeet Singh, and he actually managed to get a mother who had her husband murdered, her sons murdered, her brothers murdered, to come over to Canada and present what had happened to her whole case in Canada, and it was logged in as a war crime. And the Canadian government are now taking active steps. The American Sikhs have taken active steps and legal steps so that the people who carried out some of the genocide and massacres are banned from America. If they come to America, they'll be arrested. Now, in the same way, the British government are putting pressure on Putin now for this this plane crash stuff, yeah? And whereas before you had, who was the guy who got poisoned?
Litvinenko.
Plutonium?
Litvinenko.
Yeah, right.
I couldn't pronounce
So
that.
they've just announced his trial today, 8 years later. Now the reality is, to all Sikhs, we had a Sikh kingdom. We had a country that we then surrendered to the British, which should have been returned to us 100 years later in 1947. We have an ethnic land that we belong to, and we're a population there. Now, that you have to understand, the orphan kids of this massacre and this genocide are not going to forget the fact that you murdered their mothers and their fathers, and it's okay. There will be an 84 Part 2. To prevent 84 Part 2, we have to make the world aware through PR, through different countries and the United Nations, and it's something we have to do. It's not something shall we do, it's something we have to do.
Absolutely.
And that's up to the generation.
And I think that's because now social media is such, you know, most young people are getting their news off the social media. I think that's what would be the next step if you wanted to take action, is to create a wider global community involved and not let this just be a Sikh issue, a Punjabi issue. It has to be more of an international issue. And I think that's the difference between what's happening, you know, with this cause and if you're looking at the Middle East, making it internationally known and getting a wider community involved.
You're right, and so I alluded to earlier, we're several steps behind where we should be on doing that. But you know, there was the 1 million name petition presented UN last year about defining this as genocide. There's a campaign ongoing about calling for an independent judge-led inquiry in this country about
so it's getting the international.
There's a UN-led inquiry campaign going on, and all these things are achievable, but sometimes they do take a long time. You know, just a couple of months ago, the UK government actually came out and asked the UN to have a UN-led inquiry into what happened in Sri Lanka. You know, it just shows that these things can be achieved, but they do take time.
You're quite active with the younger audience. Do you think that the younger audience who's now becoming aware of what happened in 1984, maybe they weren't even born, are going to be as patient as the old generation and maybe wait another 30 years before something happens?
I think we've seen it. I think we'll see a bit of a shift in the way we work. The older generation, they did their bit, and not only were they trying to get to rallies and organise rallies, they were also battling racism and trying to get jobs and trying to educate us. But at the same time, you know, they've got barn waving on stage and shouting down Indian government. I think that's, unfortunately for India, is dying a death. You have educated professional Sikhs who are manoeuvring in ways that probably India hasn't seen before.
Right.
Bob has mentioned Jagmeet Singh, who, I mean, and there's a lot of Jagmeet Singhs and a lot of professionals out there who are working. Incidentally, Jagmeet Singh's been refused a visa to go to India because of his work. And I think also this new generation, not only will it work a bit more efficiently, I think, and a bit more heart, I think this new generation also need to realise that we shouldn't feel bad for working on this.
Right.
We shouldn't feel like there's something psychologically wrong with us because we're talking about the past so much, or that we're wedged in some kind of time, or that we're radicalised because we talk about 84. You know, I often give this example. My gran passed away peacefully. I've never forgotten her. And I'm sure we've got family members out there. We may do like prayers in their name every year. We never forget those people.
Right.
We're talking about a whole-scale genocide, and we are being told to forget about that. They even want to take remembrance away from us. They want to take that humanity away from us. So I think it's important for us, as the new generation who are going to be manoeuvring in this sphere, not to feel bad for trying to bring some justice to these people, because I think if we don't, then...
Do you think it's going to take an aggressive step? There was that Indian general that was here last year who had his throat slit. Do you think it's going from talking to aggression?
I think there may be people who will be tempted to turn towards aggression. I think in this country, I think that's totally the wrong step. I think it's, we live in a democratic society. We should be more clued up in terms of some of the American countries and Canada have done
I think the new generation,
in terms of challenging those people in the court.
You've got Facebook and stuff, you'll see a sea change. Where you've got pressure on a new generation of MPs and politicians and stuff, you will see a change. It's inevitable. If the Russian money before was preventing Russian inquiries, now there's been a sea change. So you don't know which way the wind's going to blow, and there can be a change. Now, if the Jews can get justice for their Holocaust, and they're still arresting people now in Argentina and Brazil who've been in hiding for 50 years, and they're still bringing them to justice, then we've still...
Well, I think the difference, the primary difference between the Jewish community and the Sikh community or any other community is their global influence and their global reach and their economic wealth that is still allowing these kind of inquiries to take place so many years later. And that was my point, that, this is an issue that needs to be addressed, but it needs to be addressed to a wider audience so that action can be, can take place.
I think you're right, and I think the Sikhs aren't far behind in terms of our spread across the globe. And in terms of wealth and stuff, we're not far behind that. I think the challenge for us is to organise ourselves better and to be able to make those arguments better. The Jewish community have been very successful in remembering the Holocaust and educating people about it. And that's probably the single most important thing here. Is even if you don't have a connection to India, even if you don't have a connection to Punjab, even if you think this was 30 years ago, so far away, it's got nothing to do with you. The single most important thing about this is this is a genocide that took place, and we need to make people aware about it so that it doesn't happen again.
Right, so, through a program like this and other programs that are similar, you call it, creating awareness. I just wanted to come back quickly on the general that had his throat slit last year, and not saying that, violence is ever acceptable. However, can you see how something like that would happen?
Of course.
When people get frustrated. So,
can you imagine, I'm not condoning any kind of violence, but can you imagine a Jew walking through central London and he sees Himmler walking the streets of London, or he sees Hitler walking the streets of London? What kind of reaction will he have? Does all sensibility and rationality and logic go out the window and all you can see is somebody who's butchered your people? That's why this government has to take a lot of responsibility for what happened. That person should never have been walking the streets of the UK. And I think that's the biggest point. And he's not the only person who's been implicated in a Sikh genocide in India, who comes and goes freely to the UK. And I think there's a bigger power that needs to be held responsible, not just 3 or 4 individuals who reacted to him.
Do you think that should be taken into account in the sentencing?
Of course.
Of course. And I think this is another opportunity for the UK government as well.
In India who are politicians, who are part of the genocide, who own properties in London, who own £1 million properties in central London, because London is a safe haven for a lot of people. Now, the reason we should put pressure on the UK government for inquiries and stuff is because they can freeze the assets of war crime criminals. Yeah, and they've done that to Gaddafi and loads of other people who have been found guilty or whatever, yeah? This is why we should carry on the pressure. And I'm telling you now, there's loads of Punjabi politicians and Indian Delhi politicians who own property, who come backwards and forwards from London, to Delhi or London to India. And if we put pressure on the government and there is a PR campaign, watch, there will be a sea change. Because that's what's happening in Canada now. Yeah. Canada and America, Indian politicians are avoiding because they know they will be arrested and they'll be brought to justice.
But saying that, I live in America, this is not mainstream news by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm part of the Asian community, and this is not something that you read about or hear about, or even in Asian media. So, yes, maybe there are cases, isolated cases, where this is being looked into and investigated and people are being held accountable, but it's far and few in between. And yes, a PR campaign needs to be done because this has to be done on an international level. There has to be more being done because the risk is that if it isn't, this generation who is now learning about it isn't going to just wait and see and discuss and rally. You will have more throat slittings. You'll have more violence take place. So I think the pressure really needs to be put on and has to be done quickly.
Of course.
We see what happens when people are oppressed and don't see justice if you just look at the Middle East and what's happening. So,
and the other side of this is a real opportunity for UK government to influence India into actually doing something.
right.
You know, if those people who have got allegations against them were denied visas of coming over, that would send a powerful message to the Indian government. And you know, some of these people are very important people. Some of them ministers and MPs and senior positions
Bollywood
in India.
actors as well.
And if those people were stopped coming over to here,
Right.
Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister, has had a period of time where he wasn't allowed into UK and America, etc. And that sends a powerful message to the Indian state. So this is another opportunity for UK government to be able to influence that.
It definitely is another opportunity. Now, whether or not they act upon it and take that opportunity to either paint a better picture of who they are across the world, we'll see what happens. I just want to thank you guys for coming on today and discussing this.
Thank you.
And I know you guys have been very active about it. It's a cause close to your heart. And I hope that our viewers have taken away something from it, have learned something, and perhaps will be more focused on trying to make a change. You've been watching Broken Silence. I'm Sanyaa Gardez. I'll be back next week, same time, same place.